Welcome to Puro Politics, the political podcast of the San Antonio Express-News. My name is Gilbert Garcia, Metro columnist, and I'm joined by
Kerry Clack, columnist, editorial board.
Metro editor Greg Jefferson.
Nancy Pryor-Johnson, editorial board, deputy editor.
We're going to talk later in the podcast about two San Antonians who are running for higher office, Roland Gutierrez and Hurd. But I wanted to start off talking about a big Sunday story that, Greg, that you co-wrote about a push that's happening to build a new arena downtown for the Spurs and possibly have that and a new stadium for the Missions side by side.
Right next door, yeah.
Yeah, so what's going on with
Which is would be a hell of a footprint. That's a lot of space. So it kind of starts with the ownership groups of both the Spurs and the Missions. You've got a lot of cross ownership. Peter Holt, who is managing partner of the Spurs organization, he's an investor in the San Antonio Missions. Bruce Hill, he's the Spurs investor from way back. He's also an investor in the Missions. And there are just several other Spurs shareholders who also have stakes in the Missions. So it's not really surprising that there would be, some discussion about building a downtown baseball stadium, which the Missions ownership groups have been pretty clear about. Nelson Wolff Stadium on the far west side is pretty run down. Major League Baseball is not thrilled with it. They took over minor league ball a couple of years ago. And minor league teams have until, I believe it's 2025 to come up to MLB standards. The Missions ownership group had to get a deferral because, Nelson Wolff Stadium is so far behind what MLB wants to see. But even apart from that, it was clear from the beginning that the Missions want to be downtown. This is not surprising given that one of their investors, two actually, is Graham Weston and Randy Smith, who are co-founders of Weston Urban, which is a major downtown developer. Having a baseball stadium downtown could make it more attractive to live. Ultimately, you have more residents living in the area because of heightened nightlife and more sporting opportunities, that kind of thing. You'll have employers then moving downtown. Well, really good for. Go ahead.
As you pointed out too, if you do have the arena, the basketball arena, and the baseball stadium side by side, you're covering almost 12 months of the year. I mean, that's maybe
baseball and basketball. Yeah, it's very complementary. So the Spurs, they've been in, the AT&T Center is 21 years old. Their lease expires in 2032, which sounds like, that's 9 years away. That's quite a while. It's actually not. I mean, you can't go to Walmart and pick up a new basketball arena. So it's not surprising that they're kind of exploring the idea of moving downtown now. And it's also not surprising that they would want to do so. This is something they'd want to consider. The AT&T Center, if they wind up leaving and coming downtown, it's not going to be because AT&T Center is a low quality facility or, needs a lot of work. It really doesn't. I mean, it needs some sprucing up. It needs a few more modern amenities. But really, it's about location. So when the county kind of won this coup against the city in the late 1990s, Mayor Howard Peak had been talking with the Spurs about, a downtown arena somewhere. And it just didn't work out. He was proposing basically the parking lot of the Alamo Dome. It just didn't pan out. So the county under then County Judge Mary Taylor Cryer kind of swooped in and said, hey, We've got real estate right next to the Freeman Coliseum on the east side. And that's what happened. The problem is, there was never any real push by the county to develop, to kind of encourage development around the arena. So you don't have much in the way of restaurants, bars, everything you kind of look for outside of major cities. Yeah, that's right. It's like basically they took AT&T Center and then built it up amidst, a lot of warehousing operations, logistics operations. I mean, it's pretty, it's pretty barren out there, and it's not gotten any better over the last 21 years.
In thinking about this, and I know former County Judge Nelson Wolff is really, and I was thinking about
hates it. Hates that.
He hates the idea, and I was also thinking, I don't know about the baseball stadium, but we're talking about having a new baseball stadium when the current one was named after him. So
Right.
there've got to be some emotions there. But
Yeah.
But one of the things I was thinking about is that building a new basketball arena downtown is almost like a statement that the very idea of locating AT&T Center where they did, that the whole project was really a mistake in some way, because it didn't generate what they were hoping to, and they're basically saying, well, we got to. It's not.
That's right.
The way to go.
That's right. But so there's some pride involved in this. I mean, like I said, this was Cindy Taylor Cryer's baby back in the day.
Yeah.
But Nelson Wolff was her successor, and he's really the one who oversaw the construction of AT&T Center. He was behind hundreds of millions of dollars of improvements to the facility over the years. So he feels, it's kind of a point of pride for him.
Sure.
So it's hard to, now be talking about a downtown arena. If we were talking about a baseball stadium downtown, maybe his tone would be a little different, maybe not. But he raises a really good point that, if this becomes a thing and the Spurs, do pursue in earnest a downtown baseball stadium, one thing the city and the Spurs will have to address is what do you do about the AT&T Center and the possibility of it cannibalizing business from the Alamo Dome? Because suddenly you'll have the AT&T Center without an anchor tenant. There's almost, to me, it's really hard to imagine them bringing in another anchor tenant, somebody who will keep the place, kind of humming, big chunk of the year. Like, who would that be? We don't know. And I just think it's very unlikely. So you'll have, the county will still own the AT&T centers, and they've got to keep it going. They're going to, they'll be really leaning into much more concert and event business than they've had to do up to this point. Mm-hmm. And that's going to cut into, what they're trying to do with programming at the Alamo Dome. Mm-hmm. So you've suddenly got two facilities that were already competing, doing it much more fiercely.
Yeah. It'd be instructive to look at the history of the pyramid in Memphis, which was built for, it was built for what was then Memphis State, their basketball program, and also as a concert facility. And then I think it was used by the Grizzlies for a while until they built a new arena like downtown near Beale Street. And they had I want to say that it ended up being bought by like Dick's Sporting Goods or something like that, and it's been turned into this incredibly big megastar. If I'm wrong, anybody knows about that, they can correct us. But I think they struggled with. We've got this thing. It's fairly close to downtown. It's this huge arena. What purpose does it serve now?
Yeah.
What? Okay. And there's so much. I mean, first of all, great job by you and Madison.
Thank you.
And just
thanks.
We need at least an hour just to really go through all of these.
It's a lot to unpack.
Different things.
Yeah.
First of all, looking at the AT&T Center. As a native East Side who spent most of my life on the East Side, and I supported AT&T Center. I supported the Alamo Dome. I love the idea of a downtown sports district, but I almost resent like hell the way things were done. Is that promises were made,
right?
And they did build it. There's nothing wrong with the facility, but they did nothing around it. So why is there any talk? And it doesn't sound like there is any talk about still trying to do something around that, because it's not far from downtown. Center. Yeah, it's not.
Yeah, no. I mean, not that we've picked up at all in our reporting.
Okay, and then when it comes to a minor league baseball stadium downtown, I'm a baseball fan. I've been to Oklahoma City on assignment and on a free night gone to a minor league baseball game. Sure. How many other folks do that? If you're coming to San Antonio, I was in Oklahoma City. If you're coming to San Antonio, and it's just the base, and I'm just trying to understand this myself. What is the attraction of a minor league baseball team in San Antonio, in downtown? Downtown.
I mean, the only, first of all, it's, and this is kind of a two-pronged thing. It's easier to get to than driving out, US 90 to the far west side. So if you're coming in from San Marcos, from New Braunfels, it's just easier to access. unless you can't find parking. And that's that's another thing. And we couldn't even get into different parking configuration. There are just too many unknown variables.
There'd also be more entertainment around it.
That's right. Yeah, that's my next point. Yeah, I mean the idea is you would have not only a new stadium, but you would have a lot of restaurants and bars within walking distance, but also you'd be likely to have, and probably with some kind of city or county incentive, a lot of restaurant and bar development close to the stadium. So you would have, it'd be a lot like,
but who was,
like Staples Arena in
who would
Los
be
Angeles.
going, who would be traveling to San Antonio?
Oh, you're saying for my new
baseball game?
Yeah.
Because everything else that's around there, it's gonna already be around there.
That's the thing. I mean, for the missions, you're talking about locals. Nobody's coming in from Corpus or
they have
Laredo, right? Yeah. So
I mean, again, I love the idea, and as someone who loves baseball, I love the idea of after this broadcast, being able to walk a few blocks to a baseball game.
I think that may be part of the idea behind creating, co-locating these two facilities.
Yeah.
Create kind of like an even bigger district, which will attract, more retail, more restaurants, more bars, and it becomes much more of it's not just a minor league baseball game at that point. It's kind of like a night out. It's like go have a nice dinner, have some drinks, go to the game, have some more drinks.
And it is the question, though. I mean, long term, because if you have a shiny new baseball stadium downtown, I think maybe early on there'll be interest.
Yeah.
And the question is going to be long term. Are people going to want to keep going to minor league baseball? I'm with you. I think it would be really fun.
Put the minor league team at AT&T. Put the minor league stadium at AT&T Center, and then build around it like that's
Yeah. I think it would be really fun, but I don't know what the audience would be for it over a long period of time.
Right.
I mean, I guess an obvious question, and this is something you all were working on, and I'm sure it's really hard to get any information at this point, is like, how is this thing going to be funded?
Oh, yeah.
Just that.
Well.
Biggest
The
question.
Spurs, it's going to involve public financing.
So we're talking about the city, you think? Or
yeah. I mean, it's complicated in that you've got the Spurs lease agreement with the county, which expires in 2032. Basically, if they leave any sooner than that, it's you're talking liquidated damages. I mean, you're basically talking about a buyout of that, and that's of that lease agreement. So that's one part of it. And it would be hard to imagine, although, maybe I was going to say the county would probably have nothing to do with the development of a downtown arena, but maybe they would join with the city, partner with the city of San Antonio to help with the development. I think that's unlikely, but it could happen. But yeah, you're talking about city funding. Probably having to go to voters to ask for some kind of public financing.
how do y'all think that would go over with the taxpayers of San Antonio?
I see mixed reviews out there. I see people saying, no way.
But what about Wemby? Because look, that's
the big selling.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I mean, I just, I see people saying the money should go to other efforts, but I actually haven't seen what those efforts are. So people are saying they should go to other efforts and benefit people of San Antonio better. But I haven't seen any ideas yet. And so I do think, the arena could help. And could help tourism, could help the economy here. And again, I have not seen, if you say that the stadium, which, I live downtown now, I don't know for how much longer, but I live here now. And that's also a mixed bag of what I think of that, given the construction and everything. That's another episode. But I do think it would help. Sometimes you're driving around downtown and it's not exactly the most lively place and there's not a whole lot going on. And it's kind of sad. And like, I'm getting back just last night from Miami, from a National Association of Hispanic Journalists conference in Miami last week. One of the receptions I went to was at the Miami Heat arena. It was right there. It was downtown. We took, we walked it. It was lively. There's so much around there. And it felt, I mean, obviously it's Miami, Florida, right? But it's bustling. It's busy. There's traffic all over the place. Right. Half the time we couldn't get an Uber to pick us up because they canceled because they were so frustrated with the traffic. Yeah. But imagine, and I think San Antonio, we need to think bigger. And we need to not hold ourselves back and just look at, well, it didn't work out in the past or it didn't deliver, but, think of the possibilities of what it could do.
The thing I was going to ask you, Carrie, is because I think we've both seen over the years that even people who are big sports fans, there's sometimes a pushback to the idea of major league sports franchises basically, forcing or maybe blackmailing. I'm not saying that's a proper term for what's happening here, but it does happen sometimes. Communities into saying, you got to buy this thing for us.
Being used as the other woman in the case of the Oakland Raiders or the promise of an NFL team. I do think Wemby is a wild card. I think that if it's something that goes to voters, it would be one of these issues which has the potential to unite this coalition of very liberal and very conservative activists against it. And again, I think that it changes if we're not talking, again, taking AT&T and the Spurs out of it, just looking at a baseball stadium. It'd be different if we were talking about the potential for a Major League Baseball stadium. Because I still want to believe that somewhere down the line there's that. One of my great experiences at the Papers when the Spurs played the Pistons in Detroit, and one night, on an off night, a few of us, me, Mike Finger, Tom Osborne, the late Tim Griffith, we went to a Detroit Tigers baseball game in the middle of downtown. And who goes to Detroit Tigers baseball games unless you really love the Tigers? But it was a great experience in going to Greek Town afterwards. I would love for us to be able to have that here in San Antonio with the baseball stadium. I just don't think it's going to be with the minor league. And I do think there is, when it comes to taking it to the voters, I think there's especially after the false promises of the AT&T and the Alamo Dome, especially the AT&T, because the Alamo Dome, you can make a case. The Alamo Dome really has more than paid for itself and is valuable. But the AT&T, which also is a great facility, it was just not a single promise was kept. And I just wonder how much support there would be among voters. The fact that I'm torn myself.
Yeah, I think, the great sort of like, maybe political center might get behind it. But I think your point is really interesting. Progressives are going to say, well, this is benefiting developers. That we have a lot of big needs in the community. Why are we doing this? And I think there are conservatives who are going to say, this is just another big spending.
I met this lady right before I left for the conference, and I went to get a manicure, and this lady starts. So she finds out I work at the paper. It's like, you look familiar, and then she says, "Oh yes, okay." So the first thing she talks about was the Spurs, and she starts going off and saying, "Well, the city shouldn't help fund it," and basically her premise was, the Spurs have plenty of money. We should not. We should not have. And this lady's she's a surgeon, and she lives here in San Antonio, and she moved here from the East Coast, and so she says the Spurs have plenty of money. Look at how much they are paying Popovich, $80 million over 5 years. So do we really need to give the Spurs any money?
Right, and. She's not wrong.
Yeah,
that's not the way sports works now.
I know. No, it's not. It's not. But you also, all of this kind of works together. 2 years ago, the Spurs kind of restructured its base of shareholders and its governance structure. So what that means is they brought in a private equity firm from San Francisco, Sixth Street Partners, and Michael Dell. They bought a combined 30% of the team. And so you lump that in with the Holt family. and their ownership, they've got, and they can do what they want. And they restructured the management so that Peter Holt, Peter, the son of the great Peter Holt, who really kind of ushered the Spurs through his championship era. The son he had been chairman of the Spurs. He's now the managing partner, which means he has operational control. And that hadn't been the case before. It was always kind of, you'd have to negotiate with other investors. He doesn't have that constraint now. He can pretty much do what he wants. And then after that, you had several other major major new investors. There was Joe Gebbia, who is a co-founder of Airbnb. Catherine Lewis, locally, she became an investor. They have a ton of investment capital that they're working with now. Yeah. And so could some of that go to an arena? Yes, it could. Yeah. Will they pay for their own arena? Very unlikely. They will do... they will try to do so if they proceed with this. They'll probably try to do so in partnership with the city, which is to have taxpayers pay for part of it.
And if Tony Gonzalez was here, what would he ask?
Right.
Tony Gonzalez would say, and are they going to play all their games at the arena? Are they still going to go to Austin?
This is, go ahead.
No, it's an interesting thing because, of course, there's been, and Tony Gonzalez has been upset because they're playing a couple of games in Austin. Yeah. And of course, there's been that fear of the Spurs relocating. The whole thing has reminded me of, because I don't know that any team does that kind of thing now, aside from the Spurs, where they play some games outside of the city. But I remember back in the Celtics area, and this is like the latter part of the Havlicek era and all through the Bird era, I think from about 74 to 95, they would play about 3 games a year in Hartford. And the other day I was looking at that because I was remembering that. And I didn't really know the history behind it. And apparently, this may or may not be true, but apparently, the ABA was still around. And they were basically trying to lock down the Hartford market because they thought maybe the ABA might try to go into Hartford. So the Boston Celtics thing, we're going to play a few games there. So there was a logic to it, and I think with the Spurs, I mean, there is a logic to the idea of we want to expand our market, and we can do that. And I've always thought, and I know there are some intelligent people who have the opposite take on this, that playing a couple of games in Austin actually maybe solidifies the idea that they're going to stay in San Antonio, because if they can build a fan base in Austin this way, they wouldn't necessarily need to move. It would work for them.
I agree. And it goes back again to drawing people from out of town, which again, you're not going to do that with a minor league baseball team. The Spurs, especially this what we think is going to be this new Wemby-led era and Pop-led era of the Spurs it's going to draw people from Austin, which goes back to the point. If the Spurs in the AT&T Center, then why don't y'all even now at this late date start building around that corridor on the east side so that the folks coming from Austin after the game, you don't route them back on 35 to go back to Austin to go downtown.
That's my
high-speed rail between Austin and San Antonio.
Oh, yeah.
With a depot right at the AT&T Center.
You remember when Julian was mayor and they had the east side redevelopment, those forums, and the AT&T Center was always a topic of conversation. What are we going to do with that?
It's just, do they just look at it like a lost cause? Like there's just no way it's ever going to happen. So I think that, would that, and I guess the question would be, how expensive would it be to do, and why hasn't it been done yet? Why haven't they built up that area around the AT&T Center? Are they just giving up on it? And obviously, it's over 20 years now.
Yeah, that's right.
21.
So it is a sad place. It's barren.
Nothing. Not even tried.
No.
Yeah. Well, we're going to be talking about this a lot, I'm sure, over the next few months. Wanted to talk a little bit about 2 San Antonio long shots.
That's the new minor league baseball.
That's right.
Antonio Long Shot.
Okay, that's.
There you go.
Which might not be best.
Everything's all connecting here. We've got Will Hurd, the former Republican congressman, Central Catholic High School. I'm sorry, Marshall High School graduate, running for the Republican nomination for president, and we've got Roland Gutierrez, Democratic state senator running for Ted Cruz's U.S. Senate seat. He is a Central Catholic high school graduate. Both of them are, these are going to be very tough races for different reasons. I think Will Hurd, I think anyone challenging Donald Trump for the Republican nomination, they're in a long shot. And Will Hurd has major name recognition challenges and so on. I think if he got in the general election, if he somehow got it out of the Republican primary, he's talking a lot about working in a bipartisan fashion. He's talking about preserving our old alliances. There's a lot of sort of traditional Republican talk and about following the rule of law, and he's criticized a lot of what Donald Trump has done. I think he'd probably be a pretty appealing presidential candidate in a general election. He'd have bipartisan appeal. Getting there would be the big problem. Roland Gutierrez has a tough race with Colin Oliver, the congressman from Dallas, but I think he's got a pretty good chance there. But if you get out of that, then you got Ted Cruz trying to win a statewide election in Texas, which hasn't been done in nearly 30 years. So, Kerry, I'll start with you. Like, we've seen some of the messaging from both of them. What stands out to you from as far as what these candidates are trying to put out there?
Hurd is someone that he's someone that even if you're not a Republican, if you're not conservative, it's who you would want the Republican Party to look like. Not that he doesn't agree with you and everything, but he's reasonable, he's thoughtful. Of course, he lacks name recognition. It is interesting that the highest point in his career as a congressman, highest point of name recognition is something that people don't talk about anymore. It wouldn't serve him now running in a Republican primary, but it was when he did the road trip with Beto, which is when people first had that. Well, that's when people first
great work money
giving of Beto. And
memories.
Hurd is the kind of candidate, and we've said this before, Hurd or Tony Gonzalez, that's who the Republican Party should be building around and not up.
Well, one of the things, one of his big messages is, which I think would have appeal for independents and maybe some moderate Democrats, is saying Republicans ought to be concentrating on beating Vladimir Putin and concentrating on China and not be attacking my friends in the LGBTQ community. I think that's pretty close to a quote from him. And, again, we see all the demonization of gays and lesbians that are happening and the transgender community happening right now in the Republican Party. And he's really coming out strongly against all that. Mm-hmm. He's talking about, cybersecurity. Yeah. I mean, I think one of the arguments that he's making that, because one of the things that stands out to me is that he's, in attacking Donald Trump, he's doing a lot of the same, putting out a lot of the same ideas that we're seeing from Chris Christie, the former New Jersey governor. And Chris Christie is probably better at it because Chris Christie, I think, is a natural attack dog. I mean, he's got real skill at it. Yeah. But one thing that Will Hurd is bringing to the table is he was in the CIA. He's talking about national security. He's saying we can't afford to have a president who doesn't, or a Republican nominee that doesn't have this kind of experience on the international stage. And so I think he, I don't know how well that's going to play for him.
But speaking on international stage, the thing is with all the different qualifications, what you have to get in terms of donors and percentage point, he may not even get on the stage for a debate. And you would, they are for at least the first debate, especially since Trump himself is not going to be there. And it's not an outrageous number of candidates. I don't think it's even as many as there were for Democrats in 2020. The people like Will Hurd, who don't hit the 1%, who may not have the 40,000, 30,000 different donors, they should at least allow them on the stage for that first debate so people can at least hear them and see them.
Yeah.
I think Will Hurd is wonderful. I normally vote Democrat, but I would vote for Will Hurd. And someone I know told me, and this person's Black, said he doesn't know if our country is capable of electing another Black president, and saying that the racial disparities on the great landscape of politics, right, in our nation is just so divided racially that they think that there will not be another Black president anytime soon, and that would actually hurt Will. I hope not. I hope that's not the case. I hope that I hope he has a shot, but I mean, I understand as well. I know there was a recent when he first announced, there was I think it was a TPR, NPR, I believe it was NPR interview, and they were saying will who or something like that. And I mean, I've in my interactions with him and everything I've seen on him and his campaign, there's nothing that concerns me and why he wouldn't be able to get my vote, which I think says a lot. If me, I'm fairly liberal, not extreme though, right? I'm not extremely liberal, but if I can see that he would be a great president, then hopefully others could see that too, and then just come more to the middle. And I think that he's definitely what we need. I mean, we don't need some extreme, and that he talks against all this extreme. I mean, we don't need another Trump in office. We just don't. It's national security and everything else. It would be a very dangerous situation to have Trump back in office for so many reasons.
One of the arguments he's making, which is also the Chris Christie argument, is that Trump is just a loser. That Republicans had a bad midterm in 2018. They Trump got voted out of office in 2020. They underperformed in 2022. They've lost the U.S. Senate. He's I think that, and I think that's a persuasive argument. I don't know that how well that plays with the Republican base, and he's the person that they're going to go to.
I mean, you've got, take a candidate like Ron DeSantis, the ability to kind of rack up legislative victories. Like that's his thing, right? He's an effective administrator. That's part of his campaign. Yet, I mean, his policies are pretty hard right policies. And, they're designed in part, his war with, Disney, for God's sake. I mean, like a lot of that, it's purely, it's pretty transparent. It's to get the base riled up. Will Hurd's candidacy is very different. I mean, he's, he was never a governor or, a mayor. Oh, he was a congressman. So he can't claim competency in the same way that DeSantis can. But we'll see with Will Hurd how a candidate who doesn't pander to the far right, how they're going to do, or how he's going to do in the Republican primary. And I hope he gets some traction. I like him a lot. I mean, and I agree with a lot of what he says. I just get the feeling that he'll be not even kind of an afterthought. I hope not. Yeah. I mean, I hope he gets some traction, and that other Republican voters will say, okay, there's hope. I mean, it's not all about the far right. There is a more centrist wing of the party.
I think he'll generate interest from the media, but I just don't know about Republican voters. I remember talking to Joe Strauss last year, and he was basically saying my type of politics or my type of Republicanism is just not in fashion anymore, or it's not, or at least not now. And I think that's certainly true for Will Hurd. And so I feel like he's really trying to change the Republican Party. I'm not just trying to win an election. I'm in the process of trying to say the Republican Party needs to become a different party, or maybe go back to some of what it was before. That's hard. Yeah. That's a hard thing to do. I talked about Roland Gutierrez. He, we've been hearing for a while that he was gonna make this run. I think that, Will Hurd does not hold office now, so in a sense he has nothing to lose. Yeah. Roland Gutierrez is in a somewhat similar position in that his seat is not up in 2024. Colin Allred is basically giving up a congressional seat to run for the U.S. Senate, and I think that's what's held back a lot of people in the past. I mean, Joaquin Castro has looked at the Senate in the past, but and other statewide offices, but it's a lot to give up a congressional seat, and Colin Allred had to really fight to win the one that he won. So Roland Gutierrez, in a way, he's got a free pass at this. Bud Kennedy of the Fort Worth Star-Telegram made the point last week that while Colin Allred is better funded at this point and probably better known, that Roland Gutierrez has some advantages, that most of the Democrats in the state really are south of Austin. Dallas is really the only sort of place where you have a concentration of Democrats north of that. And Roland Gutierrez has been in the media a lot, especially the last year since the Uvalde school shooting. in this part of the state. So the idea of the question of whether he could beat Ted Cruz if he made it to a general election, we can talk about that. I think it's very, very difficult. I think Ted Cruz is less vulnerable than he was in 2018 when he ran against Beto O'Rourke. But if we look at the Democratic primary, Roland versus Colin Allred, do you think he has a reasonable chance?
I find my thinking evolving on this. Some of it was affected a little bit by what Trey Martinez-Fisher told us last week, but both Allred and Roland, the national attention they both get comes from regular appearances on MSNBC. And they'll have Allred on talking about different issues, and with Roland, it's generally it's one issue, guns. And initially, I was thinking that could be a disadvantage to Roland if he's pigeonholed as just a one issue candidate. But my God, what an issue that is! And it also gives him the opportunity to talk about other issues. I was impressed by the video he released last week in announcing his candidacy, and parts of it reminded me that when he's on, he's a damn pretty good orator, and that's important. And he has this in the intensity and this passion. Someone who works up in D.C. was telling me last week that they think that one advantage that Roland has over Colin is that Roland is more authentic. And I don't know Allred that works, from what I see on TV and but I think that this could be one of these races. I think Cruz is going to be difficult to beat. But I think it's also possible that whoever emerges from this race can beat them. And, unlike in 6 years ago, it was just Beto and Beto becoming this phenomenon. I think this could be a sharp primary where the winner who comes out will be the better for it. In going against Cruz, who, whatever you think about him, it's not dumb and is a pretty good debater. So at one point a month ago, I would say this is Allred's all the way, but I no longer feel that way. We'll have to see what happens.
Yeah, you make really good points. I think Roland is he's authentic. I don't think I've ever spoken to him or watched him speak at any rally or spoken to him or seen him talk to any other member of the media or about Uvalde and him not have tears in his eyes. And, just to talk about what the families there have shared with him. I know the families in Uvalde are very supportive of Roland. I haven't heard any negativity, about that, but something to look at is, what has he been able to get accomplished for them? Yeah. So yes, he has them at the press conferences and yes, they support him. But his hands have been tied. He hasn't been able to really get traction for a whole lot of change there. And so you can kind of look like that too. Well, he tried, but what did he actually get accomplished?
I think he also has to really find a way to articulate that his big concerns are federal issues that apply to the U.S. Senate, because he talks about guns, how Texas has failed people on guns. Obviously, that's a federal issue too, but he has to really emphasize that. He's talked a lot about the failures of the Texas grid. That's a state issue.
Yes.
And so I think Medicaid expansion, the fact that Texas hasn't done that, again, a state issue. So I think I think that he has to be really
I'm kind of wondering. It sounds to me like he's running for governor in some ways.
Yes, it does. Yeah.
If he and what he's doing is really interesting. He's I don't think he's going to be he's not going to be all about gun control. I think that's going look, the Robb Elementary School shooting changed him. I think probably as a person and definitely as a politician before the massacre. He was a backbencher in the Senate, and nobody would have thought of Roland as somebody a credible candidate to go against Ted Cruz. Now, maybe they do. But he's saying, it's like, look, rural communities have been abandoned in a lot of ways. And it's not just about gun control. It's about access to healthcare. It's about education. It's about infrastructure. if he makes good on that promise, and you kind of saw this, him starting to move in that direction during his kind of introductory video, like if he can actually flesh that out, I mean, he may be able to find a way for Democrats to talk to rural communities, kind of like Beto O'Rourke made a point of doing. He went around. That's what, that's what his tour of every county in Texas was about, taking these kind of rural communities that see very little in the way of state and federal funding, who have just a lot of needs, a lot of deficits, and saying, Democrats, we used to be there for you. We're going to be there for you again, that kind of thing. Will Roland be able to do that? I mean, we'll see that in the next phase, whether he can do that or not.
Yeah. Well, on that note, we'll wrap things up. Hope everyone's doing well. We'll be back again with you next week. Take care.